Hey everyone, and welcome to another edition of 5 Questions with Seth, this time the Patriot X Insurrection edition. First off, I'm very excited to share that I'll be once again working with Hire Heroes USA, pledging both author proceeds as well as pledged volunteer hours for every copy of Patriot X or Patriot X Insurrection sold throughout 2022. Thrilled to partner with them. They're a great organization to help military families and vets go from military life to getting the perfect job that they want in the civilian world. So happy to be a part of that organization. With that, we'll give you a quick synopsis of Patriot X Insurrection. So the book starts off with the world literally on fire. Across the globe, cities are getting decimated with riots, buildings are getting destroyed, people are getting hurt. There's just mass chaos everywhere. Former gunnery sergeant, former Marine Raider, Chris Masters, and his team are brought in by his somewhat paramilitary group to begin to quell some of this violence and once more return the streets to the communities as they should be. So it's a very fun, very exciting story that we get into. And as they pull some strings, as they start to get the violence tamped down a little bit, they start to realize that there's an undercurrent. There's a kind of seedy organization that's seeding a lot of this violence across the globe. So Chris and his team go off to resolve that issue as well. Let's put it that way. With that, we'll get right into the questions. So the first one is, what is my inspiration for Patriot X Insurrection? So a little bit borrowed from the headlines, from the protests, the proper protests, and then the improper riots, I suppose, from 2020. There was a misused video that kept getting popped up on social media, even some news outlets, that actually sprung from the 1992 riots in LA. And this clip always gets to my heart. It's this gentleman who is out on the street in front of his shop that he spent 40 years to build, himself coming from a very lower economic class background, and he worked his tail off to create this business. And he was watching it just be destroyed, and worse, it was being destroyed by his own neighbors. So he's out on the streets pleading with people to stop, and you can just hear the heartbreak in his voice, and that really got me thinking about situations like that. Quite frankly, I get a little bit angry with them, and sometimes a little anger can turn into a very robust book and story because you put a lot of passion behind it. So that was really the inspiration for Patriot X Insurrection. Second question, how do I deal with sensitive topics? So when I look at the riots of 2020, and to a degree of 1992 as well, there's some real world stuff. There's injustice in the world, and that's where the protests start. They're trying to bring awareness to injustice. They're bringing awareness to the fact that, unfortunately, racism still exists in our country. Hasn't been completely resolved and dealt with, and that's can be challenging to write about and be really fair to all the audiences out there. So the way I do it is really twofold. One is to be true. Really put my clearest lens cap on as I write, and just be true in what I write. But like in all books, I do a ton of research too. I haven't been in a ton of positions in my life where I was unjustly treated in any major way. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist out there. So talking to a lot of friends who have experienced things throughout their lives, and even recently, that helps me kind of frame the message, frame the book, so that I can be as honest, but also be kind in how I deliver some of the messaging. So that's how I kind of work on those topics. Third question, how do I write real world fiction? The truth is, very carefully. There's no problem with borrowing from the headlines and finding real world events that kind of trigger thoughts. But you have to create entirely fictional characters and fictional events, but they can be borrowed from reality. How I do it is again, it involves a lot of research. So I research some of the events, I research some of the people, I research even some of the, conspiracy theories to see if there's any truth to them and see how far I can explore them. But then comes the fun of writing. I just get to play the what if game. Well, what if there was this seedy senator or secretary of state or big business person or whatever it was that people were kind of pointing to in the stories? I get to play a what if game. Okay, what if there was, even within our own Congress, our own Senate, our own Justice Department, people that were doing things that they probably shouldn't have. I get to play with that story a little bit and flesh it out in fiction. So that's kind of how I work on those. Question 4. How do I continue Chris's journey after the first book? As a writer, it's probably one of the bigger things we grapple with our characters, especially when somebody went through something as devastating as Chris did in the first Patriot X. But that also kind of sets the stage for where I go with the story. Chris's journey is not over. His healing isn't completely done. Part of it will never be done. So a lot of that is Chris's continuation of healing over the pain about his wife and daughter being caught up in the terror attack. There's also these unresolved feelings with his new team. He's still not sure about them. They're a rogue group. They're a paramilitary group. He has this really clouded vision of the morality of working with this team. Fortunately, in the case of Patriot X and even more so in Patriot X Insurrection, there's real injustice being out there. There are innocent people getting hurt. Makes it really easy for him to go and do his job. One of the challenges in Patriot X Insurrection is a lot of the people that they have to go after are, they're often civilians. They are in areas that we're not used to seeing things like this happen. So it's major cities like Dublin or Seattle or Portland or wherever it might be. So they have to take their tactics a little differently. These aren't military people that they're going after. These aren't, hardened terrorists they're going after. These are people that are caught up in a mass movement that spun out of control. So they have to change their tactics a little bit. Final question. And the 5th question always comes from the writing community, some of my author friends out there. And the question is, how do I write a follow-up to such a major launch? So Patriot X, for me, was a very major launch. So taking on the next book is sometimes a little bit scary. So when I launched that, it really comes down to Chris primarily. And his journey, his story's not over yet. So taking his character arc from the first book and finding those strings that still really need to be worked on a little bit and carrying some of those over in the second book, ensure that his journey continues to be as fluid as possible. I wouldn't say easy because his journey's not easy at all, but from a writing perspective and for a reader, I want smooth pathways, a smooth sailing highway to go from book to book and keep the story going, keep the intensity up. That's probably the other thing. Writing Patriot X, really easy to dig into Chris's pain and anger. Patriot X Insurrection is a little bit less about Chris's pain and anger, although he's still dealing with that. But now we're talking about worldly pain and anger, and we're trying to write those fine lines between protest good, riot bad. Getting a message out that there's injustice in the world. Not only is it good, it needs to be done. Destroying people's businesses and attacking people who have nothing to do with what it is that is causing the injustice, let's be honest, that's terribly wrong. And and so Chris and team get to kind of tackle that, and I get to write a very fun book about it, while expressing some ideas. So that is it for 5 questions with Seth. Again, all military personnel, veterans, their families, get 40% discount at SethShostrom.com if you purchase one of the books from my website. The code this year is Honor 2022. Honor, all obviously one word, small cap. 2022 is right attached to it, and that'll get you a 40% discount across SethShostrom.com. I hope you liked 5 questions with Seth. I look forward to getting out there in the world now. The events are starting to happen again, so I'll see you at a book signing soon. Take care.